Hi, this is Dan. And on today's episode of Bad Movies to Love and Good Movies to Hate, we are joined by Scott Greene, who's an instructor over at Platt College, Jonathan Arnold, who is one of our industry experts at Los Angeles Valley College in the area of entertainment and business law, and in fact is going to be doing a series of workshops over the summer and in the fall that are free, that will detail what you need to know about the business of entertainment. We are determined to get people hired. And finally, we have Cindy Waite, who went to USC at the same time that all four of us did, and came to us from a background in journalism. And she is one of the great screenwriters that I've ever met. And she still needs to send me her most recent draft of the most recent script she's been working on. So anyway, what we're going to be talking about today is, again, our bad movies that inspired us. And let me start with Cindy. Cindy, what's a movie that you absolutely love that the critical community does not like?
Well, I don't know about the critical community, but I just watched The Bad Seed while I was getting dressed, and boy, what a bad movie that is. And so much fun, just really fun. And it, I wonder about the decision they made when they filmed it to use what was exposition from the novel as straight dialogue with this stilted literary language and deliver it in this extremely over the top, chewing the scenery manner. And I know that they just transferred it from the stage to film it. But Miracle Worker was also transferred directly from the stage to film it. And it is a great film. So there's just no excuse. But it's just over the top fun. And by the way, it has a beautiful score. There's a very tender theme for the little boy who was murdered that they play now and then. And it's really moving. And it almost makes you believe the movie's going to be good too, but it isn't. And I also love Deathwish. And that's...
Now, let's specify the 1974 one or the more recent one?
Oh God, no, I don't want to see the more recent one. I saw the previews and no, that's a must miss. But I was mugged a few times in the 60s in New York. And the last time was extremely violent and traumatic. And I just can't help watch somebody go into Central Park at night or the riverfront at night with a gun and wait for people to attack him and then kill them. And it's disturbing to me how much I love that, but the truth is I do. I'm sure there are a whole lot of other bad films.
No, we'll continue. I'll circle back to you momentarily. Scott or Jonathan, have you seen either of those movies, and what were your thoughts?
Jonathan?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, no, I have seen Deathwish too. I don't mean Deathwish 2. I mean the original Deathwish, the 1974. I like it for a lot of reasons. I thought it was a little bit more artsy and gritty, probably because of a slightly lower budget than Dirty Harry. It was a genre that was floating around. I thought Charles Bronson, who's not the world's best actor, did a comparable job. And I know this sounds really nerdy, but hey, I was a histocritter at SC, and now I'm a lawyer in entertainment. But I thought Herbie Hancock's score added so much to it. The haunting music when he is going into the park with the proverbial gun. So I'm right there with you.
You know, the bad... Oh, sorry, Dad.
No, Scott.
I was going to say The Bad Seed for me is one of the great bad films, only because it's like watching an episode of Donna Reed that's gone crazy. It's got all of the stereotypes of the late 50s or the early 60s when I was growing up, when you would see, the woman in the the nice dress and the pearls and the high heels doing the vacuuming. And it's got that sort of quality to the mother and the characters, but they're all twisted and distorted. I guess I'm trying to remember, is he the gardener, the guy who starts threatening our evil child who gets burned? And some of the other characters, they all seem like distortions of the stereotypes of that time period. And it's just so much fun. It's like digging up the dirt on them. It's like the Peyton Place of murderous children films.
Did you ever see Deathwish?
Yes, and I like it very much. To me, it was one of those films that is almost a kind of a throwaway because I didn't have Cindy's experiences in it. So it's one of those films that you sort of watch when nothing else was on, and it was good. I saw it on TV. I didn't get to see it in the theater. It might have had a lot more impact on a big screen.
Jonathan, have you seen? You already asked you, didn't I?
Yes.
Jonathan, did you see either of them?
Bad Seed.
I saw Bad Seed, but honestly, I can't recall it. I don't know if that's from lack of afternoon caffeine, but I just honestly, I can't recall that one.
How about Deathwish?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was.
So anyway, I of course saw them both and loved them both for very, very wrong reasons. I mean, when you see Patty McCormick as this angelic girl with that Sound of Music and Village of the Damned type hair and makeup, you look at her and you know she's up to no good. And she doesn't even hide how malicious she is. I mean, compare her to Betty Davis and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and Betty Davis's performance looks downright subtle. And the other thing that I really enjoyed about it was the concessions that they made to the production code, because the production code could not tolerate the original ending when, of course, the murderous little girl gets away with it. I actually thought that was a great moment, sort of that Sharon Stone for Basic Instinct in training type lesson. And I wonder if Sharon Stone's character had seen that as a little girl and said, yeah, this is exactly what I'm going to do. But what they did was not only does Rhoda go out in the middle of a rainstorm and get struck by lightning, but if you'll remember, they do a curtain call where everyone comes out and takes a bow. And then the actress who plays her mother, whose name just suddenly escaped me because, age, starts spanking her as a sign that, oh, bad girls shouldn't murder their little boys and their janitors. And it's just like, okay, so now we're doing Mommy Dearest child abuse. I mean, the movie has it all. And Scott, did you see it with me when we saw it in West Hollywood as a play with a guy playing Rhoda?
No, I didn't get to see that.
I saw it with you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was,
and it was
I knew I saw it with one of you.
in drag.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what it did is it brought up the great subtext of what's going on with her. Were they her neighbors or her relatives? Where it's a Twilight tandem couple where the guy's gay and the wife is lesbian. It was like, okay, they actually found the core to this play that even the 1980s TV movie remake couldn't touch.
I wish I had seen that. That sounds fantastic. Did they do the original ending in the play?
Yes.
Okay.
And when you have a guy who's like 6'5" jumping up on another guy's arms and saying, "Oh, Daddy," I can't remember what the stupid line is, but he jumps up on and you swear the other guy's about to fall over backwards. and it was one of those things that made that event memorable and actually gave me a greater appreciation for the play and the movie, because I'll be honest, when I thought of the movie, I kept remembering when it was on KTLA out here, and it'd be on in a 3-hour time slot, and it would get to be rather slow by that point. And at a certain point, after you've seen it 5 or 6 or 12 times, you kind of dread the longers that go on in between the moments of sheer dementia.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, that's true of a lot of bad films. When we remember them, we remember the best parts.
Yes.
You mentioned, you know, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which I dearly love as a film, but looking back on it, trying to watch it again, what I really love are very specific moments
Yes.
more than the film itself. I mean, I can't think of a scarier moment on film than Betty Davis singing I've Written a Letter to Daddy. That's one of the highlights of my childhood, is seeing that scene. And some of the other scenes, like the parrot scene, and you know, but you are in that wheelchair, Blanche, you know, some of the great lines that come out. But sitting through the
Yeah.
whole movie is tougher. The girl who plays, I think it's the neighbor's daughter or niece, I can't remember what her role is, needs some acting lessons.
That's
Really
Betty
bad.
Davis's real daughter.
Really.
So
What?
you're seeing that and you're saying, okay, Beatty, your mom gave you this chance and you so blew it.
Yeah,
No,
So,
I had no idea that was her.
oh
I
yeah.
didn't
And you know, if one of the fun things to do is to track her down on YouTube, where she's now an evangelical preacher. And so you watch that and then you think of her performance and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and it puts that performance in a whole new light.
Mhm.
All I ever see is that fat sister of hers slouching around, you know, with her breaths in the wrong place, just like Sid Charisse in Party Girl, where you know that the person speaks English as their first language, but they're talking as if they don't.
And every line is shouted at the same level and volume and pitch, and everything is enunciated, and it's like watching a badly programmed robot talking. That's what it's like watching her scenes, which in its own way is kind of funny, but it's not as entertaining as the great, you know, Davis and Crawford moments in the film.
And actually, my problem
Betty
with it,
Davis is,
yeah, my
I'm
problem with
sorry, go
it,
ahead.
even though I dearly love it, is that it's so sadistic that
Mhm.
the joy that you get from the banter between Betty and Joan and Annalee, who, or I think that was who's the one who plays the next door neighbor, and Victor Buono, is
Yeah.
undermined by how vicious it is from the moment Betty Davis starts kicking Joan Crawford when she's at the bottom of the stairs and then starving her. It's like, okay, I really don't like Sallow either. So if I don't like Sallow, I really can't take this one that well. That's why I prefer Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte.
Uh,
Sorry, Cindy, I interrupted you.
I have no, well, I, Betty Davis was so wonderful in that movie. I can't even consider it a bad movie. Um,
Oh,
she,
it's not. It's not considered a bad movie. It's considered very campy, but it's not considered a bad movie. It's not. It's not something that reaches the level of, let's say, Berserk, in terms of
Mhm.
just sheer nuttiness that you can't help but love.
What was
uh,
Joan Crawford's circus film again?
Yes, it's Joan Crawford at the
sure.
circus with Ty Hardin, Diana Dors, and Judy Geeson. I mean,
Yeah.
can we say what's there not to love?
Yes.
It's just boring.
You
That's the
know,
problem.
that should have been a wonderful movie. I mean, it should have been a lot of fun, but I just watched it and I found it really tedious.
Some of the movies that we remember the most fondly can be kind of slow when you see them again as an adult, even if they were fun when we were younger. I mean, what's the running time on Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte or
I think
Berserk?
34 minutes.
Yeah, it feels long, even though it's very entertaining. There are times when you just go, cut, cut, get to the next scene, cut.
You know, I showed that in class once in my broadcast 25, the screenwriting class. And I was saying, okay, I'm doing individual meetings with students, and this happens to be one that I can pull down really quickly. And I was amazed because the class loved it. They hadn't seen something that was that intense, or that or with that much scene chewing, with that much histrionics throughout it. And even though they were disappointed a bit at the end, although how can anyone be disappointed watching Olivia de Havilland get her just desserts of having a potted plant dropped on her
Yes.
after she reveals her true personality? Because after all, of all the Warner Brothers actors who sued Warner Brothers, she's the only one who ever won. You know, when you see things like that, it's doesn't have the sadism of Baby Jane, and it has so much else going for it that's fun, that its length hurts it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the big difference between them simply is that Baby Jane has great iconic scenes and great iconic bits of dialogue that everybody loves to quote and remember. And Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte doesn't really have that, even though I agree with you, it's less sadistic, which makes it easier to watch. Outside of the opening scenes with Bruce Dern, it's easier to watch the film. And there's something about Betty Davis playing a Southern belle, which somehow just works. I don't know what it is, but every time she does that, there's something about it that makes it very watchable. You know,
well, there's another thing about it that's very great, and that is whenever I have a bad time at school, I think of that moment when she takes that plant and drops it behind George Kennedy, and I go, yeah, that's made me feel good. I can now face the day. You know, when you see her fighting that authority, when you are, I could spit in your eye with no trouble at all. When you think of that, going, okay, what's my excuse for being cowardly in the face of administrivia?
yeah, yes.
So, Jonathan, what are the one or two movies of yours that you find are guilty pleasures?
Does TV count, or can it only be film?
It can be anything. It can be,
Oh, okay.
you know, if you want to talk about MTV videos that you have a guilty pleasure
Oh,
of
no,
loving,
no, no.
that's fine.
Not
Or cartoons or so, whatever.
Not that guilty. In terms of cartoons, though, I could say I still think Family Guy is as silly as it is, and maybe now I still kind of respect a lot of its, you know, cross 80s and 90s references. I love some of the nuanced things with it, how like Brian the dog is really Snoopy in his late 20s, early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he can stand up and talk, and he drinks, and he's trying to be a writer as Snoopy was when Snoopy was younger, but it's not really going anywhere, which fuels his drinking problem. So I like, you know, that is a little bit of a guilty pleasure. There's more art to it than I think a lot of people realize. I'm not going to say it's the finest show ever, but it's definitely a guilty pleasure.
Well, absolutely.
Oh, go on.
Cindy, what do you think of Family Guy?
I loathe it, but then I've only given it at the most, you know, a minute at a time. So that's not fair.
Some of they, like The Simpsons, had that great period where every episode is watchable. And then, I don't know, either a new writing team or something comes in who doesn't quite get it. So they had a series where they killed off Brian, and it was public reaction that brought him back. And then the personalities of some of the characters changed, and things kind of fell apart later on. But during that great period when they were doing parodies of Star Wars and various other films, or going into
yes,
the
I saw
multiverse.
that. That was good.
Yeah.
That was good. I should give it more of a trial.
They had a great episode where they go through the multiverse, and they go into a land where everybody acts like a Disney character, but they're all anti-Semitic because of Disney being anti-Semitic. And
I
it's
remember
just,
that episode.
it's a brilliant parody. I mean, some of what they caught was terrific. And, you know, some of the writing was just spot on. Some of their best things have been when they do parodies of musicals, like Peter being on a football team and suddenly starting to sing Shapoopy, you know, things like that, where they just have these great musical numbers. And they usually are willing to go for the jugular and just kill off characters and things. You know, having the characters.
You know, Disney was also very misogynistic in that he wouldn't let women be primary animators.
Right.
Didn't pay them much. You know, so I was really pleased with how much hell P.L. Travers put him through.
Yes.
She had him over a barrel and she tortured him, and it was enjoyable because of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I tend to love Family Guy for the same reasons I used to love The Simpsons. And that is that it's continually transgressive, like the best of the Warner Brothers cartoons, where they are just shattering one convention after another, and they don't care. And you don't even have time to get offended, because from the time they've done something that you go, wait a minute, what are they meaning by that? They've already moved on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But like The Simpsons, I have a feeling that someone on the Family Guy had kids. And remember what happened with Matt Groening when he had kids. All of a sudden, his little boy became Bart Simpson's age, and he realized that the way he caricatured Bart Simpson was role modeling, and that his little boy was doing it back to him. And all of a sudden, he understood why parents were objecting to Bart. And so he pulled way back on Bart. That's why when we watch the old Simpson episodes, they are so weirdly better, and it's because Bart is a much more central character, and he's expressing what we all wanted to do as kids but we're afraid to do. And in the later episodes, Bart might as well be one of the other kids. He doesn't stand out anymore. And with Family Guy, I think that either they got too comfortable and they became lazy, such as Saturday Night Live for the past 20 30 years, or many other shows, like when you look at Friends toward the end of its run, and all of these things, they just get really lazy and sloppy, and hopefully not bad enough to where they ricochet backwards on previous seasons, but sometimes they do, like Roseanne, the original, not the very aborted new one, which I still think ABC was idiotic for canceling, because it was the #1 show on TV. That was ABC in that period when they didn't care about making money. So, or Disney in general didn't care about making money. I don't quite understand it, since it's one of the most cannibalistically capitalistic companies of all time. But yeah, they're just now coming out of a period where they were averse to making money, and so it's fascinating to watch that happen. And yeah, Family Guy kind of fell into that.
Well, I know with Simpsons, they of course had changes of writers, and during their great period, though I'm not one to laud anything coming out of Harvard Business School, a lot of the writers came from Harvard Lampoon. And so they were practiced comedy writers before they started on the show. And that was the time period when you got like Conan O'Brien writing for it. And that was during the great period of The Simpsons, where literally every episode was a must see and you had to watch it. And the same, I mean, the first couple of seasons of Family Guy were more like it was more like the early episodes of Married with Children, where it was like a family parody. And then they picked up on what was popular and it became great again. I think The Simpsons probably had maybe 10 years of just absolute greatness. And Family Guy probably had about 5 seasons or 6 seasons that are just absolutely worth preserving and watching. And then the fall off afterward is kind of like I was just didn't have any laughs in the whole episode. So yeah, I mean, there's that core of really great moments that make both of them worth it.
I remember they turned over a lot of it, at least I thought, on The Simpsons various series. I know, forgive me, this sounds like name dropping, but I went to high school and was in Boy Scouts with one of The Simpsons writers, Jay Kogan, whose father was a successful comedy writer back in the 60s in television. Jay was the one that basically wrote that famous Simpsons episode, Like Father, Like Clown. And one of the things that I like about all art forms, and I know maybe, Dan, I shouldn't say it, but I've always wanted to run a studio and say, I'm going to give you the parameters of the legal and business stuff, and then I'm going to get the hell out of the way. And I just want committed writers and directors and producers to make movies, because I think that's the only formula that really works, is kind of let people go and do the voodoo that they do within certain defined parameters, but then just to leave it alone, because I've felt that a lot of things like that or other shows that I've liked, when they get too formulaic, could I think of a TV show like Saturday Night Live, for example, like Dan said, the past 20, 25 years, it just loses some of that magic. And I think some of that magic is what keeps the stuff interesting.
I think what's happened with Saturday Night Live And this was about 30, maybe even 35 years ago, because I know the show's been running 45 years. But what they started doing is they started accepting their cultural relevance instead of fighting against standards and practices. So they became social warriors, not social justice warriors, but just social warriors, where they felt that they were doing something important rather than something that was amusing. And so rather than showing up there and you're going, wow, they're all high, aren't they? You're sitting there looking at it going, you really didn't write this skit, did you? You kind of sketched it out and then you decided to just let it go because it's really not going anyplace long.
Yeah.
If you watch the best episodes of Saturday Night Live from the early years when you still had like John Belushi, for example, they had a certain percentage of very funny political humor, but they also had episodes that were simply funny. You know, his samurai character, the cheeseburger
I give you
restaurant.
permission to like John Belushi's Samurai. I do not
Thank you.
find it culturally appropriating. I do not find it culturally cringy. So yes, you can go ahead and like it and feel safe.
Thank you.
You've got an Asian's approval.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much because it's simply a funny routine. It's not funny because it's stereotyping a culture. It's funny because it comes from Mars. It's like out of nowhere. It just comes up. And some of their best of those early routines, you know, like Land Shark, for example, and some of the others. Sure, of course, it was a Jaws reference, but what made it funny is that out of nowhere they just came up with this idea that was really absurd, and they just played it the right way and made it wonderful.
How about the Mr. Bill show?
Yes, yes, the Mr. Bill show is wonderful, and Albert Brooks's short videos, like the one where he's sick in bed and he orders in roasted chicken, which is a New York thing, and you know, just the whole routine with, you know, him rubbing the chicken on his chest and saying, I might as well just put it right here. That's how bad it is for me, you know, that kind of thing. It's just these little moments of just delightful writing that are total non sequiturs, but are funny and brief and clever, and just they're just brilliantly done, and they're as good as the political humor from the time. Even having Chevy Chase.
Really traumatized
What?
by Mr. Bill.
Yes.
I found Mr. Bill really, really upsetting. Really upsetting.
Yes.
Well, it's probably the same failing I have that made me not love Family Guy.
Well, it is a pretty brutal cartoon as a cartoon, but it was done because if you look at other claymations and things like Gumby and stuff like that, as brilliantly done as they are, they're kind of sweet and charming. And it was a very Saturday Night Live thing to do something that's basically Bambi versus Godzilla. You know, it's the character you're supposed to be finding cute just getting stomped on, and it sort of echoed what people were feeling. I mean, to a certain extent you could say that during time periods like first Watergate and then the gas crisis after that, the energy crisis with OPEC, and you know, when people are feeling stepped on themselves, sometimes they want something that's just shocking and transgressive and a slap in the face, because the shocked laughter is still laughter. And
well, at least Bambi died quickly.
Yeah, true.
That's true.
I just couldn't bear it. Oh, no. Anyway.
It's amazing that very few people except those who lived through it remember that anymore. I mean, you know, who remembers those Albert Brooks videos or Mr. Bill or anything? But I think that they would be as successful today as they were then. I think people would have the same reaction. The humor on that part is still there, whereas the live action human humor of Saturday Night, I haven't found it worth watching in ages. I can't. I try to watch it and the skits just don't make me laugh. You know,
I found
I
them
can,
very formulaic and hit and miss these days. Once in a while, there's something funny, but it's kind of like they just make reference. They seem to go stale, even I
Yeah.
think for folks that are younger than we are, that are under 30. They seem to go stale within 2 weeks. Whereas the old Saturday Night Lives, you could watch them and they still, they're dated, but a show from 30 years ago still seems somewhat relevant today. Whereas I've watched occasional reruns from like a year ago and it's like, yeah.
I mean, when you see a great episode, like a really good one with Rosanna or Emily Latella, or any, I mean, the fact that I can still remember those character names tells me that I found them funny enough to remember back in the 70s. And I'm still remembering them now. And I can't think of anything that they've done in a long time that I find on that level. Most sitcoms I don't find that funny either. And it's not because I've necessarily seen those same jokes over and over. It's partly that, in many cases the performing and the writing just isn't quite there. Either the writers don't really know how to go for it and make it clever, or the performers all seem kind of the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine trying to do Bob Newhart's show today, the original Bob Newhart. I just think people would look at him and say, we need someone younger, we need someone more attractive. Too many of the people in his office seem like they're nuts. You could just see it being filtered out, what made it so great.
You know what was so special about the Bob Newhart show? That it was the first double income, no kids, don't want kids show. That Bob and Emily were the first married couple who never wanted children. Okay, there were a couple of episodes where they floated the trial balloon and then they pulled way back. But by and large, every time you were presented with a kid after that, it was in a nightmare scenario, usually with Howard's son. And things like going to the Farrell's type ice cream place, and Bob gets totally humiliated.
Yes.
But then you expand it into The Office, and everyone in The Office is also single. Or they're all singles, but no one really wants to get married until Carol gets married very late in the run of the show. And so Bob and Emily's decision to not have kids was very, very ahead of its time, and in its own way was every bit as transgressive as Mary Tyler Moore being an office girl who wasn't looking to marry her boss. So it was that run of shows on Murderers Row was unique.
Yeah.
And they all had something that was quite deliberately a thumbing of the nose towards standards and practices. And standards and practices let it go for the same reason the production code always let things go, because it was a conspiracy between standards and practices and the networks. And Jonathan can totally disagree with me on this. But
no, I'm in violent disagreement. It's about what we were chatting about before the recording started, by the way, and the voodoo that you do, Dan. So that was a lot of it. A lot of that stuff died, I think, when they could show that you could not follow the standards and practices. Even some of the lesser things, the less salacious prohibitions that existed with that, and still have a successful show. I'm thinking of a show that I actually like, a TV show, and I don't know why I've got TV on the brain, but Mad About You, which I thought in its own special way was kind of charming. And when they finally did introduce the issue of kids and marital things, the show fell apart because it's just not what it was about.
It changed you cannot change the ground rules. That's why once I Love Lucy started going to Hollywood, then to Europe, and then moving to the country, I'm hard pressed to name really more than one or two episodes in that entire run that are good or are memorable. Because when people think of I Love Lucy, they think of them in one of their two New York apartments, and that's it. Right. When people list their favorite shows, and in fact, the majority of their favorite shows tend to be right up to where she has Little Ricky, and not so many after. but you still have it until they start going outside of New York. Once they start going outside of New York, it kind of falls apart.
No,
I think
I think it was Drew Casper who said jokingly in class once, because he had so many students like myself from Encino, and it was all in good jest. He was talking about how that show fell apart when they moved to Encino, where the Ricardos moved to Encino. So anyway, I don't mean to be rude. I've actually got 2 New York film writers that I've got a call today at 3:30 my time, 6:30 theirs. So thanks for having me, and love to
Jonathan,
join you
we'd
for
love
the
to
next
have you
one.
again.
I would absolutely love it. There's no rest for the weary or attorneys. So that's it. And guys, I'd love to do this more than talk to them, but they are paying clients, so I got to hoof it to a 212 call.
Got to make that money.
All right. I'll talk to you all very soon, and thank you so very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Bye, Jonathan.
thank you. It's nice meeting you. Cool.
See you again.
Take care. See you again.
See ya. Okay, my embarrassing movie that I love is a TV movie. So I'm going to pick up on where we left off with Jonathan. And it's a TV movie called One of My Wives is Missing. And it's the greatest TV movie of all time. I use it in class as a structuring device to show how you need to write a script. So there's a cliffhanger every single commercial break. And because it was made right in that era before you had home video, or it was very early in the home video era, so it would have taken 2 videotapes to record it. It was one of those things where they didn't care that the ending sucks, because the bottom line was they got you to sit through the whole thing. And it stars James Franciscus, escapee from Long Street, Jack Klugman in that period between The Odd Couple and Quincy, and Elizabeth Ashley as she was slumming on television, doing things like When Michael Calls in order to make enough money to do Cat on a Hot Tin Roof on Broadway. And James Franciscus plays a husband whose wife has gone missing after they've had a fight. And Jack Klugman plays a retired New York City cop who's now kind of doing quiet time in a small resort community with Lake Tahoe, not Lake Tahoe, the lake, Big Bear, doubling for the East Coast. And it's really good in the way it sets things up, because Elizabeth Ashley shows up and says, honey, I'm sorry I fought with you. I'm sorry that I walked out. I'll never do it again. And James Franciscus goes, I don't know who you are. I've never seen you before in my life. And she keeps insisting that she's his wife, and that he better watch it, or they'll call Dr. Ackerman because of his nerves. And so he realizes he's being gaslit, and it just keeps falling forward. You feel guilty for watching it, and you can't stop. And out of all the classes I've taught where I've shown it, it usually turns out to be the favorite screening of the year, simply because no one can guess where it's going. And sometimes I'm very cruel and break it before the end and say, we'll watch the rest next week. So it's again, it's shameful. It's got high 70s fashion, including the avocado appliances in the kitchen. And when he goes, oh, Jack Klugman goes, oh, if my wife could see this kitchen, she'd cavell. Yeah, you hear that and you go, really? If I was selling a house with this, I know every single person who walked through would say, we're going to tear this kitchen out first thing.
Yeah.
And shag carpet and the bell-bottom pants. So you can spend your whole time looking at the production design of this and go, wow. A lot of people thought this was really, really the ne plus ultra. But I find all these 70s TV movies to be just lovable.
Some of them are better than most of the theatrical films at the time. I mean, of course you had great films coming out. You had the Midnight Cowboys, and you had other films like that, but people forget there was also a lot of dreck. There was a lot of simply lousy films as well. I can't sit through 5 Easy Pieces. I'm sorry.
5 Easy Pieces is torturous. Can you imagine someone saying to their housemates, let's Netflix and chill tonight and watch A Touch of Class? I mean, Glenda Jackson won her second undeserved award for Best Actress in as many years for that. And when you try to watch it today, there's nothing about it that gives any hint that why it was nominated for so many awards.
Right.
I think the award was for her other work.
Yeah.
They were just voting for her name because that is a dreadful movie.
Yeah.
But she'd already won for Woman in Love, which of course she won that because they didn't want to admit that everybody went to see it just to see Oliver Reed and Alan Bates showing off their you-know-whats.
Yeah.
But that's the only reason that movie made money. And I think George Cukor was really referring to that more than the Adam naked poster when he says, well, you know, you can really tell when a movie is bad because they focus on how naked the woman is, and you can tell it's really awful when they spend all the publicity talking about how naked the guy is. And just like the Bible was sold on the picture of Michael Parks as Adam, the Woman in Love was sold on that drawing, that hand drawing of the wrestling scene.
Right, right. And that did make them successful, but the TV movies at the time were wonderful. I still remember Crowhaven Farm as one of my favorites from that time period.
From the 70s?
Yes. And
that's the one with Hope Lang and Paul Burke.
Yes, yes. The one where she starts having memories of being a Puritan accused of being a witch and getting pressed to death under a door when they moved to this new location, she and her husband. And it's a great, creepy little film. There's The Old Man Who Cried Wolf, which is about an old man who witnesses a crime and nobody will pay attention to him because of his age. I'm trying to think of some of the others. I know you
Home for the Holidays.
Which
Sally
one?
Field, Eleanor Parker, Julie Harris. Come on, Dan, she just died. She was Libby in the group. She was in Play Misty for Me.
Jessica.
Yes, her.
Yes, I know who you mean. Jessica Walter.
Jessica Walters. Yeah, and it's got this entire cast, and it's an hour-and-a-half murder mystery movie.
Yes. Home for the Holidays.
Sally Field.
Yes.
No wonder you escaped to do Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah.
Because this is where she was hammocked between Flying Nun and going off with Burt Reynolds and then winning Academy Awards for Norma Ray.
Well, her great coming out party, so to speak, was Sybil.
Yes.
Because that was a knockout of a performance. I mean, I remember thinking
to meet Stuart Stern to talk him into it.
Yes.
Who did? Who needed that?
Stuart Stern, yeah.
He's the guy who wrote Rebel Without a Cause. And he was one of Cindy's teachers when they were in filmic writing.
He was good. He was really good.
And did he write that? Did he write Sybil?
Yes.
The TV script. Okay.
And he had an especially big challenge with it because the book had been a huge bestseller, and they were trying to do it without getting the rights to the book.
Really?
Yep.
Huh.
Well, it was supposedly based on a true story, so they could probably try to go back to the original or something like that. But no, I mean, it's far too close to the book.
No, they were just taking the real case. It's just like when they did the three versions of the Long Island Lolita back to back, and only one of them had gotten the rights from Joey Buttafuoco.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, that does happen where people will take the information from a book that is from public domain and use the book as research without paying for it.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they did eventually pay for Sybil only because that's not even the real name of the person who it was about. It was made up.
I think the network might have eventually given in and acquired the rights.
Yeah.
Because saying it was based on the national bestseller is a big selling point.
Yeah.
And was probably worth the clearance.
Yeah. And when you see her performance in it, it's such a knockout and such a contrast to everything she had done before. The scene where she's with her father in the restaurant, starts snarling at him like a dog because he's not giving any credence to what she's saying about what the mother did. It's superb. I mean, she's just superb throughout.
Well, the fact they got away with explaining what the mother did.
Yeah.
was very shocking at the time, but they got away with it because of the success of Helter Skelter. Because Helter Skelter was such a record breaker. It knocked Night Stalker right out of the #1 position of highest rated TV movie of all time. And that was really the beginning of the miniseries movement.
Right. And it was pretty non-censored, so to speak. You got a real sense of what was going on in it. There were other TV movies. I know you've talked about Along Came a Spider.
Along Came a Spider is fantastic. It's Suzanne Plachette.
Yeah.
And Ed Nelson.
What
And
happened?
it has nothing to do with either the Ken Evans book, and Nancy and Cindy knows exactly what I'm talking about there, because Ken Evans wrote a book called that. He was our screenwriting teacher, and a former executive. Or the more recent Along Came a Spider. That's one of those titles that's been used way too many times.
Yeah.
I love Small Sacrifices, and Deliberate Stranger was the name of the MOW.
Yes.
For the book.
Isn't it amazing how Mark Harmon in the early part of his career was playing these good looking murderous types, like in that and in Sweet Bird of Youth, that really, really great Liz Taylor remake that was done in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see how he is now, this kind of grand old man, all gruff and wise, and you're going, wow, what a difference. You know what?
Here's another bad movie I love, Dark Passage. Totally stupid. I mean, it just gets stupider and stupider, the plot, but it's really entertaining. But my favorite moment is where Agnes Moorehead is defenestrated for no reason. I mean, she just sort of walks near the window and it sucks her out.
Yes.
Poop out the window.
Well, that was part of that tradition at that time, because remember also in Party Girl with Sid Charisse that Lee J. Cobb comes after with the acid saying, I'm going to pour this all over your face. I'm going to destroy your looks. And then he pours it all over his own face by accident instead.
Oops, it splashed the wrong way.
Yep.
One of my
That's Nicholas Ray for you.
Right. Just totally over the top. One of my favorite bad movies is one Cindy turned me on to called Dangerous Crossing.
Oh, great.
One of the stupidest movies I've ever seen. It's about a woman going on a ship to take a cruise with her husband, and then her husband disappears, and everybody's saying, you didn't come on with anybody, you're booked here alone, and acting as if they've never heard of it. I mean, it's got like classic movie of the week feeling, where it's just a massive gaslight, which seems to be the theme of a lot of.
They lock her in her cabin because she's nuts, they think.
Yeah, yes. And
that's sort of like The Lady Vanishes.
Yes, yeah.
It is, except in Lady Vanishes, she has a little more freedom of movement. Here, the woman keeps having these their voiceover soliloquies about what she's going through. So she'll be sitting there staring up into space, and you'll hear her voice saying, should I trust him? I don't know. I should at least pretend I trust him. Otherwise, they might think I'm crazy. And you're just hearing this without, her actually saying anything. And the other characters are just kind of standing around waiting for her to finish until she's done with her soliloquy. And then they pick it up and it's like, did you have an episode? I mean,
Eugene O'Neill should never have written Strange Interlude. It's all that play's fault that you have these characters suddenly doing Shakespearean-like asides in a modern setting.
Yes, that's what this movie feels like. And
plus the wonderful foghorns.
Yes, this ominous foghorn that comes up for no reason periodically throughout the film.
Bright sunlight, foghorn.
Yes, and it's really a scary foghorn. I mean, I'd love to have that for a Halloween sound effect. If you ever get to see it, it's delightful. It's a very entertaining bad movie.
It'll make you want to go on a cruise. And then Carl Betts, the guy who was in the Donna Reed show, Carl.
Yes.
Carl Betts. when he's killed at the end and goes overboard, has this wonderful scream. On a 10, it's a 10. Very satisfying shriek.
Yeah. And then at the end, when supposedly she's back together with the guy who didn't believe her through most of the film and wasn't really treating her any better than anybody else, you get the impression that he's still being a condescending jerk and still controlling. But now he's the hero and she's the heroine and everything is great. And I'm like, I would run from all these people. They locked her in the cabin. They wouldn't believe her. They treated her literally like they were going to put her in an insane asylum. It's just a delightful film. It's so over the top. I really
remember during the Love Boat era, you had so many things set on cruise ships simply because they had the right to use that the ship. There's also, I think it's called Vacation to Murder, that has Robert Reed and Celeste Holm. It's got all of these old time performers in it, and it's really, really ridiculous. And you can tell who the murderer is during the first 5 minutes, but that doesn't hurt it.
What is it called again?
I think it's called Death Cruise.
Okay. I mean, when you think about it, it's not a bad movie, but when you think about the original Death on the Nile, that's the same idea where they got just a bunch of actors who were names at the time and threw them together so they could have the gathering of celebrities type film, the Grand Hotel type, where you have all these big names thrown together. But it's fun. It's a delightful, fun film. It's a very, very entertaining movie. It's not a bad film, but you do.
I was wrong. Sorry about this. Death Cruise had Richard Long, Polly Bergen, Edward Albert, Kate Jackson, Celeste Holm, Tom Bosley, Michael Constantine, Cesare Danova.
That is like a Love Boat episode.
Exactly.
Or Fantasy Island.
Yes.
One of my favorite, for me, a lot of the best bad movies, or the ones that I enjoy watching the most, are often bad horror films or bad sci-fi films. And what I think it may have been the first film I remember seeing it may not have been the first film I saw, it's the first one I remember, was a drive-in movie, very early 1960s, as I date myself. And it was a Danish horror film. Why my parents were when I was like 3 or 4 to a Danish horror film, but it was their takeoff on Godzilla, and it's called Reptilicus. This is one of the worst movies I have ever seen. I mean, even as like a 3-year-old, I was thinking, this is garbage. It was that bad. The monster in it is clearly at times a marionette or a hand puppet of this sort of dragon-like dinosaur attacking Denmark. And it's like watching Kukla, Fran, and Ollie do a horror film. And it's just absurd. It's wonderful, but it's absurd. And they directed it for a Danish audience, and then they redid parts of it for an American audience. So I don't know what the original would have been like, but the one that was shown here, at one point, they simply stopped the action of the film, and one guy is basically telling another, well, you look like you've been burned out. You should take some time off. And so the other guy goes, okay. And we get a driving tour of, I guess it's Stockholm or wherever they are, wherever the Tivoli Gardens is, whatever city that's located in. They see the Tivoli Gardens. They drive around the nightclubs. They see all the people in the midst of a giant monster movie attacking the city. It's utterly absurd. And
that's like Track of the Vampire, where you have this wonderful ballet scene done by someone who's not in the movie. Oh, it's supposed to be one of the actresses, but the woman who's doing the ballet has the wrong haircut and is wearing the wrong bikini. And so you have this 10-minute ballet montage in the middle of a movie about mad sculptors and vampires. I mean, it's bad enough that you've cobbled together what was originally part of 3 other movies into this kind of Frankenfilm,
yes.
and partially done by Francis Ford Coppola, by the way. But it's fascinating nonetheless of just how extreme Roger Corman could be in his salad days, with coming up with just anything that could turn a profit.
Right. It's some of it is very funny. Last night or early this morning, I was watching a film I'd never heard of called Forbidden World, which is obviously playing off Forbidden Planet. And it's about a space station that tries to develop a new food source. And they end up with basically, it's supposed to be a ripoff of Alien, but the creature looks more like the giant plant from Little Shop of Horrors. And it's going around the station killing them, and it's such a bad effect. But on top of that, they used for like the ray blasts and things, a lot of the really cheesy effects you got from like the 80s Italian Hercules films, where Hercules would like wave a staff and you get like concentric circles of light and ray blasts flying off. That's kind of what they use here.
But you know who did all of those? Actually, it was 60s and 70s Hercules movies. That was Mario Bava who did most of those effects.
Really?
Yep. Mario Bava never stopped working. And he made a couple of the Hercules movies on his own, Knives of the Avenger and Hercules in the Haunted World. That was one of the Reg Parker ones. But he did all the Steve Reeve ones too. He did the visual effects, and most of them were done practically very cheaply because that's what he loved doing. That's why when he was doing Black Sunday and all of his classics, Kill Baby Kill, they're just magnificent pieces of filmmaking, even if they're rather sketchy as stories.
The ones I was thinking of were more like the Lou Ferrigno ones, where he'd be standing on a small planet, like an actual planet would be at his feet, holding him up in the midst of like the universe somewhere, and he'd be sending blasts to other planets and things. The Steve Reeve ones are actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The Ferrigno ones are very entertaining, not quite for the same reason, because some of them the stories are pretty incomprehensible. They didn't necessarily translate them well in terms of getting the plot across, but they're fun. They're very entertaining to watch. And a good fast-paced, low-budget sci-fi or fantasy or horror, if they're really done right, can be very entertaining. That Forbidden World film was just ridiculous. Basically, the monster is trying to turn people into goo so it can digest them. It's just, and of course, one of the characters who survives is one of the ones he most wanted to die. The one who just runs screaming in every scene. That's all she really does is just run and scream. And you're just waiting for her to get it because she's so annoying.
Hey, look at what that did for Marilyn Burns when she was doing that in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She parlayed that right into playing Linda Kasabian in Helter Skelter.
True, though, of course, she pulled off what she needed to for the story.
Yeah.
And she came off like you actually wanted her to survive, this woman in Forbidden World. You're like, please run into the monster, please, because she's just so horrible. They even had a little robot companion for the lead guy who clearly it's like either a child or a little person in a costume, but you could tell that they were trying to rip off of like a sort of Star Wars aesthetic with it. I think
trying to rip off what?
A Star Wars type thing. So they've got Alien and Star Wars. The film begins with the guy in a ship shooting at other ships, and you never find out why or who the other ships are. He's just blowing other people up, and you have no idea why. It's never. Yeah, it's that like what they don't do it as much anymore, I suppose. But when they used to do Top Spin, where you'd have the plot from another movie stuck at the beginning of the movie you're watching, waiting for the movie you actually paid to go see to actually begin, which doesn't really begin until he lands at the space station and has to deal with the monster that these idiots have developed there. It's just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. I'd never heard of it before. I like things like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, but that's a more self-conscious attempt to do a comedy as opposed to ending up as a comedy unintentionally. So it's a little bit different in that regard. They've talked for years about doing a sequel to Killer Clowns, and I don't know why nobody has funded it. It was certainly cheap to do. And
I think at this point, this is where it gets really bad, when you start doing sequels to something that was a cult classic 30 years too late.
Yes.
Then it's just pathetic, because really the installed base is now in the retirement home, not even remembering this stuff anymore.
Right. And if you tried to bring back the original actors, they'd have to play the senior citizen characters.
Exactly.
You need a whole batch to run the show. It's like, seriously, they could have made a brilliant series of films from Galaxy Quest, which is not a bad film. It's a great film. But really, yeah, and I think I still have your DVD of it. They never picked up on the fact that film was superb and would have made a great series if they could have made other scripts that were as well done as the first one. But it cried out for additional films. I thought it was so good.
True.
Yeah.
Anyway, you two, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dan. That was fun.
Thank you, Dan. This was fun.